Everybody, come on! Everybody, everybody, come on! Everybody, everybody.
I'm a rapper, I'm not a poet. Poet, I'm not a rapper. Guess it's opposite there, cause you niggas just got it backwards. Got me sick to my stomach. Go up on my lantern. New trio is Frio, the most terrible tandem. Deliver shock value, but no, not Timberlanding. Critical observation alerting you ambulances. Clap on and clap off. Rap on and rap off. Hard times for hard rhymes, that concrete, that asphalt. If I did look twice, I guess that's her asphalt. May I assist you and score, get my pass out. Matter of fact, it's what you need. To rest you just fatigue. See, technically I'm filing Mrs. Wallace, I'm Rashid. Know this beat is a banger. Have no reason for anger. If I'm slightly deterred, you know I'm giving the finger. Call my savage like Corey, but not in need of Topanga. Right like 90 degrees, you in the need of an angle.
Welcome back to the Freelunch Podcast. This is your boy Tight, and I got my man BG's and what goes on.
Whoop, there it is. Whoop, there it is. What's happening, Freelunch Podcast family? This your boy BG. What's going on, dog? We back at it, huh?
Too legit to quit.
Freelunch Podcast, the New South movement. The boys are back on the microphone again.
We can't get no holiday music oh, it ain't the time for the holiday.
Yeah, you know I leave that to you. That's your department.
Well, they still playing my music. What do the lonely do at Christmas?
Yeah, I heard my jam Silent Night about 3 days ago. So
Down there in the 2-7?
just the season, yeah, in the 2-7. You know, they find up that temptation. So when I hear that song, I know what time it is.
Well, how's the with the weather changing? How's the garden doing? Because I know followers like to see updates on the garden.
This is the time of year for them greens, so they all right out there. No, even though it's gotten a little cool, they doing good. I've had some friends come get some.
Did you really?
Yeah, they one of my classmates, teammates that lives over in the area, he passed by because he had seen me posting them, so he came and got some. And then I got other people requesting, so I got to make some deliveries. So it's a promising business, man. It might be my first foot into entrepreneurship. Me and my vegetable truck.
How did they taste over the holiday? Did y'all cook them over the Thanksgiving holiday?
Well, no, because I didn't. The family members are out of town that do the holiday, and they didn't request any. But I've had some of them for Sunday dinner, and they taste good to me.
Oh, okay.
They taste like real turnip greens, so it ain't none of that artificial stuff. It's all organic.
Are you gonna as the season as the weather changes, you gonna grow any other things out there in the garden?
I'm gonna put in some of them tomatoes, some of them tomatoes. Some of them tomatoes.
Yeah, them tomatoes.
Give me some beans out there.
Put you some cucumbers out there.
I'll do that. I'll do that just because you said so. Put some of that stuff out there. So I'm gonna try to diversify and have a variety of stuff. Try it out and see how that works.
That's all right. I know people probably tired of hearing about the garden, but that's something that actually interests me. It interests me.
You should do it, man. All you need is a box. You just build your box, however, whatever dimension that you can hold in your space, and make it almost like a portable garden is what you think of it. So you build a box, put your soil in there, and just plant in that box. So a lot of people have it on like their porches and patios and stuff like that. So.
Okay. Yeah. So, I think we got another good topic happening today.
It's a lot going on in the world. It's a lot to talk about, and I'm thankful that we got this platform that when it does pop off, that we can come in and talk about it and raise some awareness and consciousness to some of the things that are going on that are affecting us.
Yeah, energy is never lost. It's only transferred from one entity to the next. So with the current climate and the American culture, I think it's important that we really grasp this opportunity to get a pulse of the American culture as well as the the African American culture within the American culture, and really discuss some of the hot topic and some of the hot issues that are kind of being manufactured from essentially some of the judgment and the decisions that are being made regarding African American males, in regards to police brutality, and the um, and what President Obama has, or in some instances has not done, surrounding the African American experience in this country. So I think that having this conversation and really taking advantages of the energy that's being put out in the universe is important.
Yeah, in my opinion, a lot of the things that are happening that are affecting us are the result of us not having these conversations as a community and not talking about these things, and somewhat being in a state of being oblivious to what's going on. And so now these things are hitting us in the face, and it has forced us to talk about it, to put our ideas and opinions out there, and in turn start strategizing for how we're going to propel our situation forward and create a better, put our community in a stronger, more stable place for us now and then for the future generations. So it's good. It's good to be talking about these things and thinking about these things that are going on around us.
So can I got a patriotic one today.
All right.
Can I be patriotic?
Always be patriotic.
Can you stand up along with me while I stand up and sing this verse?
All right.
I am literally standing up.
I am literally standing up too. We stand together.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Amen.
God bless America. Black folks just can't sing a song without putting that little fancy ending on it. You're guilty of it. You had to put your Luther on the bottom of it.
What Luther do?
You had to put your ooh yeah on it.
Ooh yeah, that little
yeah, folks just can't sing the song straight. I ain't mad at you.
Hey,
what's up?
I gotta put my own little twist in there, but that's a shout out to Ray Charles. And if you ever get a chance, every 4th of July, I go to YouTube and I listen to the Ray Charles version of America the Beautiful. Uh-huh. Absolutely one of the best patriotic songs ever done by any artist, hands down.
Yeah, it's powerful.
So when you get a chance, go to YouTube, type in Ray Charles, America the Beautiful, and listen to that version or that rendition of that patriotic song. So, I chose a patriotic song because I got one question that's gonna drive today's conversation.
Okay.
And it kind of stems from a previous conversation that was held by you, me, C. Campbell, and Trisha when we discussed the Michael Brown and the Ferguson and kind of the outrage from that situation. And as we continue daily, as I mentioned earlier, with the current energy and the current state of affairs, Ferguson and Darren Wilson not getting indicted, and just the whole energy culture that's kind of being put into the universe, I got one simple question. I kind of mentioned that racism was an ideology. And I guess for today's conversation and kind of for us to kind of drive the topic is, does America have a racism problem? You know, C. Campbell kind of mentioned during his conversation that the elephant in the room that America needs to address is that of racism. And from that thought, I would kind of like to get your thoughts on it and kind of see where this conversation goes based off of that simple question. So what do you think? What say you? What's on your cotton picking, pea picking, knee jerking, triple X rated, misguided mind?
So what's on my mind as it relates to the question that you're asking? Does America have a racism problem? And I'm going to answer that question and say, yes, America definitely has a racism problem, has historically had a racism problem. And racism expands across the world in terms of darker people, across from continent to continent. It just seems like there is a certain amount of hatred and a certain amount of just a feeling that is negative towards people of color. But to go and to stay in line with what we're talking about as it relates to America, we know that that our country, when we talk and just in our dialogue, when we talk about different issues, social issues, when we talk about economic issues and living conditions, you hear the conversation, a lot of times the dividing line is that color. It's like that these circumstances and these situations exist in the black community. These are the things that go on in the white community. So for us, that color is what we use to set the table for a lot of the issues that we deal with in the country. As an African-American male, I've seen it and witnessed it affect people from my community in terms of whether they get jobs or not. How it affects their workplace environment when they go in and they're somewhat ostracized or they're talked to a certain type of way, talked down to because they're black or because they're African American. So it's evident that even in today's culture, as progressive as we've become, 2014 is still an issue. It's an issue because it's embedded in the history. It's embedded in many people's traditions. And so they operate from the ideology of racism. And it kind of guides their decision making and the way that they respond to certain peoples that don't look like them. So we definitely have a racism problem.
Okay. Yes. America has a racism problem. This is my opinion. Yes, America has a racism problem. However, I don't believe that at the core of the problems or the issues that need to be addressed, attempting to address an ideology is going to solve any of the issues that are currently being faced. I actually believe there's a bigger problem that America has, and I think that bigger problem is classism. And I think and that's essentially the haves versus the have-nots. And when C. Campbell mentioned the elephant in the room, in my opinion, the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed is not in correspondence to racism at all. I think the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed is that of classism, and is that of decreasing the gap between the haves and the have, that 1% and that bottom tier percent in the American culture. And to be quite frank, I think that for a group of people, regardless of race or creed, to want to address an ideology, I think that tactically and strategically is essentially going down a road, is driving down a never ending road.
Yeah, as a group of people that have been victim to racism in terms of being excluded excluded from certain systems, excluded from civil rights, excluded from what's supposed to happen in the judicial system, excluded from just some of the economic access that we should all have as Americans. The African American community has been victim to racism, and so coming from that, I would agree with you. I would agree that it wouldn't behoove us. It wouldn't be in our best interest to just try to make our central aim convincing people to not practice racism, to not have such focus and such attention on race. I would agree that will not do anything in terms of progressing us forward. We should definitely be more focused on the class issues, the have and the have-nots, and what can we do to become, or to either make that playing field more balanced, or to put ourselves in the situation to where we also have. But for me, I think they work together, because wouldn't you say that if we just look at America as a whole, that there are more have-nots than there are people that have? Wouldn't you say that?
I would agree.
You agree there are more,
that's statistically a fact.
Yeah, that's statistically true. And then in that pool of people that have not, you got all of the racial groups. You got black people, white people, Hispanic, Asian. You got every culture, every representative in that group of have-nots, right? So what would happen in a perfect world situation is that all these have-nots would be able to relate to each other and see where their struggle is the same, and then they would work in unison to try to confront the people that have it and say, hey, we want some of that too. And they would be able to move together to gain access and to better their situation as a whole, right? But what happens is, in my opinion, is that the haves, the people that do have, recognize that they are the minority. And they recognize that if if the majority of people that realize that they didn't have anything, that the have-nots will rise up. Okay? So what the haves have, the haves have to find something that they can use to pull some of those have-nots on their side. And I think that's where the racism thing comes in, because now you've got a situation to where if a large number of the haves are of a certain ethnic group, then they can convince the people that come from the same ethnic group that don't have, hey, you guys need to believe what we believe. You need to believe that you're of a superior ethnic group. You need to believe in the same things we believe in terms of race, in terms of color. And they convince these people. And so now these people then forgot that there are have-nots. They just think that they're a part of this superior group, when all the time they're being used as puppets to go along with this thing to make sure that the haves continue to have. And so for me, that's where the whole race thing, the race is used as a card and as a trick to keep people confused and divided and distract them from the real issues. And I guess that's kind of where we're talking about the same thing. It's a distraction. And that's why it doesn't really be of our best interest to even try to change people's minds about it, because it's all a distraction when you get into that conversation.
So let me ask you two questions before I respond. If you believe that America has a racism problem, and you may, or I don't know if you agree or disagree with C. Campbell's thoughts around that being the elephant in the room and needing to be having a discussion about it. At the end of the day, what do you want to accomplish, or how do you tackle racism in your opinion, then, if that's your belief?
For me, it's just talking about racism from understanding the climate, understanding that there are some people that base their whole lives around using race as a way of making themselves superior and making another group feel inferior. So for me, it's just understanding the outlay and understanding what you're working against or what's around you. And that helps you strategize in terms of how you deal with certain people, what it is that makes them go, and your expectations. You talk about expectations. I know that if there's a guy over there that has racial motives and all that kind of stuff, I can't expect him to think rationally. I can't expect him to do things that make common sense. I got to know that whatever he does is probably going to be from an emotional place, and it's probably going to be related because I look different than he looks. So my best bet is going to either probably be to move around that guy and get to somebody else that's sensible that I can talk to, and we can come up with some real solutions or something that really matters versus dealing with somebody that's just going to fight just basically off the fact that we look differently. So for me, it's just knowing your enemy, or just knowing all of the factors that are going on around you.
See, to me, I think that trying to tackle this idea of racism or this ideology is, like I mentioned in the opening, that this is essentially driving down a never-ending road. And I think that if you really want to be strategic and you really want to be tactical, I think the two issues, or the two, in my opinion, the two biggest issues that need to be addressed are on the economic front and on the education front. And I think that personally, if there were strategies and if there were tactics put in place to, number one, address the economic front and reduce what I mentioned earlier, the degrees of separation between that top 1% and the bottom tier percent, and likewise in the education front, if you put in strategies and tactics to reduce the degrees of separation between that top 1% and that bottom 10%, I think that will address any of the issues that are currently, or that'll help to reduce some of the racism issues that we see in America. Now, when I speak of there being a racism, what I honestly believe, and this is actually an idea that kind of morphed from a conversation that I had with C. Campbell, and that essentially is America has an inclusion and diversity problem. If I'm saying that inclusion, if my interpretation of inclusion and diversity is racism, then essentially I may be saying the same thing. But I tend to separate racism from inclusion and diversity. I think more or less what needs to be addressed in the American culture is that of inclusion and diversity. It's a matter of understanding different cultures and not only understanding them, but then being inclusive enough to invite them into your inner circle. Yeah. So when I think of America's biggest problem, in addition to education and economics, essentially I think that the biggest problem is really more along the lines of the lack of inclusion and diversity, specifically in the South.
So if I were to define it, I would define it as racism is just the idea or the thought that my racial group, my ethnic group that I come from is better than all of the other groups that are out there. So I'm putting mine as superior, everybody else is inferior. So it's the thought, and then the action that is born from that thought is what you're talking about, the inclusion and diversity.
See, I don't think people believe that. I don't think that one race believes the other race is better. I think that you may have a few. I think it's more along the lines the lack of knowing, the lack of inclusion and diversity, to understand that at the core of who we are as human beings, we all long and want for the same thing.
What prevents a person from just seeing another human being that wants the same thing that they want?
This ideology that was created from of racism that is that is instilled in us at a young age. If you go to a park and watch a little kid doesn't care what color you are. A little kid gonna play with you.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm saying is that that at that pure innocent stage of that child's adolescent life, he doesn't see color. That color is put into us. And as we get older, because we lack the education, we tend to put up a guard. And really in a lot of instances, that guard that's put up is out of fear. Because of the lack of inclusion and diversity.
No, it's the fear. It's the fear in that person being different, and it's a fear in that person not looking like you. It's a fear of that person not coming from the same place, all based off of the outer appearance. And you feel like that person shouldn't be included because they don't look like you.
No, I'm a disagree. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not going to 100% agree with that.
Racism is the thought. It's thought followed by action. So everything doesn't end in somebody getting into a fight or something like that. It's just that thought. It's just that thought of division just based off of what you look like.
How do you can't tackle that? That's my point.
Well, I'm not saying tackle it, but I'm just saying that it's understanding that and understanding that plays a role in the whole inclusion diversity thing that you can tackle.
I think
it's in there.
Exactly. That's something but my point is that we continue. I think that the conversation there continues, in my opinion, and maybe I'm not understanding, and maybe I need to really, really grasp what you're saying, but I watch year after year, ever so often, you turn on the news, you turn on these entertainment, television, news stations, and they're having these platforms and these forums about racism and being black in America, et cetera, et cetera. And I watch those things, and I listen to the dialogue and the conversation, and yes, they're having the conversation, but it's around an ideology that can't be addressed. Why not have a platform and have a discussion around ideas and tangible solutions that can be developed? And those are addressing the classism problem. Because I bet you this, BG, if you meet a racist and he's in the top 1% and you in the top 1%, I bet the only thing that matters is the color green.
Because they're in the top 1%. But if you ain't got nothing, if you don't have anything to put you in that top 1%, that's all you got. Your attempt now is to try to save favor. Look, man, you got a lot of people. Like I say, if we want to just talk about white and black, you've got a lot of people that are white and black that are living below the poverty line. They got going through the same economic distress. Different colors, but having the same economic problem. They are in the same class. But the white people will scrape all that they have to send their children to a private school just so they can save favor with the other white people that go to their church, that live in their community, because they don't want to be seen as assimilating or being in the same situation as a black person.
Well, why can't it just be that they just want to go and get a better education?
Well, why does that education have to be better than what the black kids is getting? How do you determine that? How do you determine that that's good? And a lot of times it's not. When a lot of times there are situations here. No, there are situations here in this area where I'm living at to where the kids are going to a private school that's all white, but they have to come over to the public school that's majority black to get the reading instruction that they need. So it's not always better. That's the whole thing. So no, you don't combat that, but you got to know that that's what's going on. That's a reality of what's going on. And it's just being aware. Now, in terms of what you do is basically built out of self-preservation. What can I do to make my situation and my brothers and my sister's situation better? How can we get more informed? Those are your actions, but you got to know that in the world outside of you, that is people operating from that level of thinking.
I mean, yes, there are people operating outside of that world of thinking, but I think that the more educated we become and the more economically, financially free we become, the more we distance ourselves from that conversation of racism.
Oh yeah, of course. We do need to progress the conversation to those things that you're talking about in terms of what we can do, what we
That's
can
my
do.
point is that
Oh yeah,
change,
that's where we got to go. We got to go there.
point is that it's time to change the chapter. And so I
Yeah,
think that my point is that previously the message has been just that of racism,
yeah,
trying to address an ideology that I don't think that there's a solution for.
yeah. We got to
And
get
I
out of there.
think that it's time to change the chapter. And I think that the New South movement or the new approach or the new tactic is that of economic freedom and that of um, reducing the education gap. Now, I'm sure if you talk to other individuals, they're going to say that that's always been the motive as far as I'm not saying anything new. And that may be the case, but the point is that there isn't any strategic, tactical um, motives that have been put in place to decrease the degrees of separation between that of Oprah Winfrey and that of the young girl that was born in the projects and you name the city. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
My point is to understand how does the girl that was born in that project in that ghetto, um, how do I decrease the degrees of separation between her and Oprah Winfrey such that she has the exact same opportunity that Oprah currently has? And I think that if you focus on coming up with ways to ask the conversation that was mentioned by C. Campbell when he said the elephant in the room that needs to be addressed. And
Right.
and that's really my focus and really my thought process is to really change the tone of the conversation from does America have a racism problem? I think that anybody that fails to anybody that lives in a bubble will know that racism's still alive. They just be concealing it, to quote Kanye West. But um, I don't think that. I think that it's time to change that chapter.
Yeah. And never forgetting that we do have to move to a mode of do for self, being independent, being an independent community, independent thought, being progressive on that level. This is the next phase of what you would think coming from, say, the civil rights movement of the 60s. This is the next step because everything prior to that moment in time was just really, just fighting to be recognized and fighting to get in the same space and fighting to integrate and be afforded the same opportunities and be able to go to same places without being kept out because of your skin color. So we had that fight to get in now. Inside. Now it's like, okay, well, now you're inside. Now the door has been kicked down. What do you do? You can't go backwards and just be, having the same conversation like you're talking about. It's like taking it to the next step, taking that torch and carrying it forward and really pushing for educational establishment,
So this is what gives
economic
me.
establishment.
You're right, and this is what gives me, BG. Sorry to interrupt you,
That's okay. Go ahead.
but this is just a thought that come to me, and it's really one that I've been passionate about. I think that if it's almost the idea of growing up, your parents and them will tell you don't worry about what the neighbor doing. You need to worry about what's going on in your own house.
Right.
You need to focus on what's going on in your own house. And I think that to continue to have a conversation, whether it be, I know we're all Americans, but we have different backgrounds, and you have African Americans, and I think that the conversation at the top of whomever the leaders are should, in a lot of ways, focus on how do we decrease the degrees of separation between that young African American girl or boy in the projects to be able to connect to a Jay-Z or Oprah Winfrey or I don't know, pick someone else, or President Obama. You see, once we can reduce that gap, then if we continue to have a problem with racism, or if you feel like racism is still a problem, then you go out and tackle that issue. Right. But until you've looked in the mirror as a culture and you saying, yes, we've dotted our I's and we've crossed our T's, then I think that we're going to continue to have challenges. Because to be quite honest with you, I think those that are arguing the racism debate are the top 1% because they're trying to get to that next level with their counterparts. Whereas the bottom have-nots, they're more focused on the classism. Because,
Or should be focused on the classism.
Should be focused on the classism and trying to say, why am I not in with the haves? You see what I'm saying? And so I think what really needs to happen is really there needs to be a lifting as we climb mentality to where that top 1% can turn around, come up with ways to decrease the degrees of separations and decrease the levels between the have and the have-nots such that for those that are climbing to become the haves, they can be there and then they can turn around and lift the ones that are in the have-nots that are trying to climb too.
And if you pay attention, you will see that the terms racism and racist have become cliche terms. Everybody's using it. And in a lot of times it's being used in reverse. I've seen it. I've witnessed it from white people coming back to black people to incite, to get the black person excited to do something and get them all distracted from what they were doing. I can remember me and one of my friends, we were out at a bar restaurant, and we were sitting down talking, and it was a majority white patronage or whatnot, and we sitting down, and so it was a white guy that came over. He recognized my friend. They were talking for a while. The white guy had been drinking a lot, and so he was just talking. You know how people, when they get under the influence, they'll talk you to death. And so we were trying to be nice to the guy and all that kind of stuff. And he was getting a little loud. People were looking a little strange. And so, my friend who knew the people that worked there kind of called him over and like, I think it might be time to shut him down. So they shut him down and they were checking on him and all this kind of stuff. And then, he got kind of offended because they had cut his tab off. They started serving him water. And so now we having this discussion, and he's like, I know what it was all about. It was because you're black and I'm white, and I'm not a racist, but I know that's kind of what sparked you to call them over here. And it really had nothing to do with that, more so than it was just him being obnoxious to everybody in the particular restaurant. But he threw out the race thing to see what we were gonna do. Because by right, if he said something about race, it was supposed to incite us. It was supposed to get us upset, spark a fight, and now we get kicked out the joint because we the minority.
That ain't true either, because he could have actually been legitimate in saying thinking that that's what the case was.
No,
but I'm initiating it. My point in that situation is that I believe that just as much as it's thought to believe that African Americans try to play the race card, I think that the majority has become hip to that same strategy and try to use their own card.
It's a distraction because ain't but especially in that particular situation, wasn't nothing racist about that. We the minority, we up in there, so obviously we ain't got no problem with being around people of another ethnicity. So race ain't got nothing to do with it. But because he felt so offended, he gonna pull something that he knows is supposed to be a sensitive topic to us and spark some type of emotion out of us. So I'm just saying that you have to be careful because of what you were saying earlier, is that conversation keeps us in the same place. It keeps us from doing the things that we need to do. It keeps us distracted because It's become such a overly used term in certain people's eyes, and they just feel like it's a trigger word. So what I'm saying is that we have to remain centered and stay focused on the other stuff that you're talking about, because you could get in here and we could have this conversation about getting people empowered and keeping them, financially focused and economically and educationally focused. But then the moment somebody comes in and accuses us of being racist or being non-inclusive because we're only talking to our community, somebody might get mad about that, and then we get off track from what we're supposed to be doing. So just knowing that can also be used as a distracting mechanism as well.
Do you think the topic and the conversation surrounding racism is more or less a Southern conversation?
It's historically been more blatant and in your face in the South, and it's been undercover, not as profound or not as outwardly expressed in other regions. My opinion.
I don't hear that terminology, and maybe I'm naive to it living up here on the East Coast, but not as much as as that becomes that conversation and that word becomes the topic surrounding each and every conversation for any result, whether it goes in the direction that you want it to go in or not. One group is gonna say because he is this. The other group is gonna say he didn't get it because he is this. Mm-hmm. And I've heard those type of conversations more or less in the South. So I guess I pose that question to say, if the South took I'm not saying it is or isn't possible, but if the South became the leader and the pioneer and really changing the focus of changing the focus and turning the chapter in regards to focusing on decreasing the degrees of separation in economics between the have and have-nots, as well as the degree of education, if that would spark a climate change in just in the United States.
The obstacle that the South has, though, in certain areas in the South, is the lack of cultural diversity. So some areas in the South don't have as much cultural diversity as you would see in the DC or in a New York City or California and things like that. So you've got it to where it's one or two ethnic groups that only come into contact with each other, and they can stay in their own worlds and not really be forced to understand or interrelate with one another. But when you get into these more metropolitan areas or these more progressive places to where there are different cultures, different ethnicities, people that look differently, but they're in this same place to where they have to cohabitate and they have to work and work in this cooperative type of environment, they become familiar. And then I think that's the biggest thing in a lot of cases, is just gaining that familiarity and being comfortable with this person. Is just because this person looks differently than I am, they're not a threat.
Well, that's that inclusion and diversity that I've been talking.
That's what I'm saying. But in those areas, you're forced to do that because it's so much diversity just based off of demographics that you just get used to it, because what else you gonna do? The only thing you could do in that situation is move to the South. But if you're gonna stay there, you're gonna naturally get touched by so many different experiences and so many different types of people that over time you should just naturally adapt and get an understanding for where people are coming from and seeing those connecting points in those places to where we all are similar. So you have that in certain areas, and in the South there's a lack of that. So I think it hurts the progression of certain areas in the South as well, because we don't have that.
But I would agree, but that falls to me under that education perspective, and that falls to me in raising the educational system and understanding individuals living in the South, teaching them that the world is no longer flat. The world is round, and the world is progressive, and there are different cultures and regions, and you better get on board if you want to tap into that entrepreneurial sector, and you want to continue to grow as a human being. And I think that in that regard, that's when you have to come up with new ways and new technologies to teach the young folk that the world is indeed round, and that there are different cultures, and that if you don't come up to speed, you're gonna get left behind. So I think that your point is valid and it's true, but to me, that falls into that category of education and really finding out ways to decrease the education gap between, like you even say, from a southern perspective versus the East Coast perspective, where they are in classrooms filled with literally 10 different ethnicities. So I don't know, man. It's been a good conversation. Go ahead.
And to kind of close it out, educating and making people more knowledgeable, that leadership is going to come from the ground. It's going to come from people that are directly in the communities. It's going to come from parents and mentors. Everyday people are going to be the ones that have to drive that. It's going to be everyday people that are going to have to take a group of kids on a field trip, because the school systems are not doing it. It's going to have to be a person, a Sunday school teacher, or just a guy that grew up in the neighborhood that just wants to volunteer and take a kid to an amusement park, or take them to another city, or take them to a museum to get exposure to the world outside of that kid's immediate vicinity. Because there's a 1% that's in the politics that determines what type of education our kids get on a public level. There's a 1% that determines what businesses come to our towns and what type of amenities that we have. And a lot of times that 1% doesn't necessarily want to have that diversity and those new ideas, because those new ideas could shake it up and threaten what that 1% has. So the leadership is going to come from everyday people who care about this stuff and are willing to sacrifice some of their time, some of their efforts, and some of their money, raising people's attention to what needs to happen and exposing our peers and exposing our kids to what life could be, and a whole new world, and what the opportunities really are. And so that's why I think that it's our responsibility here to practice what we preach, and that's also share our ideas with other people so that they can do these same things in their area and in their communities.
But it's also using that ingenuity too, though, right? And also, to piggyback off what you just said, but it's also to use your ingenuity such that you utilize the platform and the resources you have in front of you. I mean, in addition to the world being round, there's also different ways to get exposure to that, i.e. YouTube, right? I.e. I am a big advocate for virtual classrooms. I have an idea that I haven't spoke of yet, but I always wanted to launch. But essentially, it's coming up with ways to connect schools in the South with schools in different regions. But I think that in addition to what you just said, to where you have teachers and volunteers that volunteer outside of their normal business hours to take it upon themselves to raise a child, because it takes a community. But at the same time, you can also be smart and utilize the platforms that have been put in front of you to expose the youth or those that really need to decrease that education gap with the different tools that are currently available. In summary, I think that the biggest or the new movement in regards to this whole idea surrounding racism really needs to change, and the focus needs to be on that of education, decreasing the degrees of separation between the have-nots and the haves in both the educational and the economic realm, but also focus around inclusion and diversity, being inclusive, being diverse, understanding the different cultures, understanding the different groups of people, and really trying to be inclusive. And I say that knowing that that's not only the responsibility of one culture, that's the responsibility of the American culture. Right. So it's not saying this group needs to try to blend in. No, because I'm not a believer in that. I think that responsibility needs to be held for everyone, regardless of race, creed, or color. So those are my thoughts, BG.
Yeah, the New South movement is a do for self movement. It's taking ownership of your own space and your own people, and stressing independence and being good stewards of your finances and your talents and your resources, and just being responsible, being prideful in what you have, and having some integrity, and have a willingness and a desire to have a positive impact on the space that's immediately around you first. Concentrate on that. Concentrate on your family members and your friends. Encourage them to empower themselves. And that thing will spread like wildfire. All you need is a couple of people that buy in and that see the progress, and other people will come on. It don't have to be the whole group at once. It's just a few that really believe what they're speaking, and they put it into action, and basically serve as examples and role models for everybody else, and people will get on board. So it starts with one: do for self, value these things, and let's get this thing cracking.
And there you have it. How can the people reach us?
All right, blogs and podcasts. Check us out sometime when you're at work or when you're just at home. Got the holiday season in full effect, so you have a lot of time. So read some of the blogs. Check out some of the podcasts. We at freelunchpodcast.blogspot.com. Also, we've got pictures that we post from time to time on Instagram, Free Lunch Podcast, and check some of our commentary on Twitter, Free Lunch Pod C.
Man, get the people your IG account.
And my personal IG account, BG_the27kid, BG_DA27KID. SEL, what's happening?
What's happening? Also, I mean, listen, if you got different ideas and topics, but also if you are an artist, whether you paint or you do music or you do anything, shoot us an email, freelunchpodcast@gmail.com. And so let us know what you do so we can figure out how we can incorporate you in this movement and continue to push this new South movement forward, and this new cult, this new idea, this new way of thinking. So with that being said, I'm going to take us out.
Take us out.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood. Here come the Luther. From sea to shining sea. And we out here.
Section chocolate. Out of here.
Ought to be sorry you gotta pardon me. Pardon me, I'm speaking it awkwardly. Charles Barkley, barking, they ain't biting. I'm getting that green broccoli. Properly giving props to the problem, fulfill prophecy. It gotta be better than that. It gotta be awesome. Obviously, niggas rolling the dice and this ain't Monopoly. My purpose was to do it on purpose. Fucking apology.